So the practical questions, I was talking with a man recently who made a similar transition as you from Silicon Valley out to purchased a farm outside in Northern California. And I was talking with him, and I was talking about your book, and he enjoyed your book, but where he was sort of or he had questions was getting into the economics of it, saying like, okay, I have this high paying professional job, I make the switch, and then there's some period of time where, say you're starting a farm, where the farm has to do a whole bunch of things all at once. You have to get the farm productive, and then you have to get the farm selling the stuff and build all the relationships, and that takes a bit of time. So I guess he was sort of wondering about the economic question, not necessarily of a farm, although the specifics of a farm and acquiring livestock, et cetera, but also that gap in time between, okay, I'm gone from my professional urban setting, now I'm in a rural setting and I'm skilling up in a trade, and the trade isn't just going to produce, $50,000 a year the first year. So there's that gap. And so he had some questions. He wanted me to ask you some specific questions about that because he knew that you were coming on the podcast. I mentioned that to him. So
Nice.
let's talk about that little I don't know if it's 2 to 3 years or 6 months to 3 years. Let's talk about that time in particular.
Okay. So that's a good question. And it speaks to the basic feasibility analysis, I guess you could say, of
Yes.
relocating to the farm. I believe me, I was a business owner for most of my career, and I was all about strategy. So a farm typically isn't going to work in like a business plan fashion. Like it's just, you can do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but that would be like a corporate farm.
Right.
Farming as a way of life is a really different mindset. One of the main things that you have to recognize is that your goal is to transition from becoming a consumer to a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you want to do, in my opinion, to get the most bang for your buck for a move like this is you want to look for ways that you can stop consuming and start producing your own in-house things, and thereby reduce the need for an income, whether that's food, whether that's, in our case, our greatest, and it's turned out to be wonderful, but our greatest return on investment is meat. Our freezer, well, I shouldn't probably say this. You can
I won't tell anybody.
Air this part that, our freezers are stocked with chicken and lamb and pork and beef. And I mean, we have a lot of food that frankly wouldn't be able to afford. Yeah. Don't come on out here, everybody.
Party at Rory's house, everybody. When's the barbecue?
Bring the girls.
Yeah.
But that's like, you go to, this whole inflation nonsense that's going on meat prices and things like that. Like we don't see it. And
now we're definitely coming out there. Here we go.
I know. Well, we'd love to have you for dinner, Will. Bring on the whole family. But that's just okay. So that's one spot. Now you're not going to replace your entire income, based on a meat budget. But my goal in saying that is just to share that it's a mindset that you're shifting away from a consumerist culture, which is what we've been trained to do. We've been trained to earn a lot of money, hire out all the help, focused on one narrow specialized task. And then make as much money as you can from that and buy everything else you need because you're too busy to learn how to do everything. So when you're coming out to a farm setting, you're trying to learn to become a generalist. You want to become proficient at many things. And this is, again, we talk about how people used to live. Most people were generalists. And in fact, a lot of the trades that are professional occupations today didn't exist 150 years ago. Well, I mean, most of the trade. But I mean, they were just done on the home farm. Like people made their own shoes. They were their own veterinarians. There was very little involvement in a lot of the things that we outsource today to specialized tasks. They weren't whole professions. They were just done, soap making. I mean, there's so many things that I could go on and on about this. It was just part of the production of the farm. And so actually speaking to this very point, I have a podcast or a talk that I gave that you can download on our website for free. It's called what did I call it? Oh, Will Work for Food. Will Work for Food. The Economics of Self-Sufficiency. And I go into the very specific topic is that if you're coming out to a farm to try to replace your, IT computer programmer job income, it's going to be really hard, and you're probably going to produce a job that you don't like anyway in the process. If you're going to come out, the main goal in the first years is wisdom, is what I tell you. You want to learn. You're there to learn. The Bible says that wisdom is more precious than silver, than rubies, and all these things, and that you should be focusing on gaining wisdom. It says that get wisdom, get understanding. If you're coming at this cold with no background in this kind of thing, your first order of business is to grow wise. You need to learn what you're doing before you try to build a business plan around it. The secondary thing is I see a lot of families come out to the country. Maybe they get excited. They read a Joel Salatin book, or they saw Justin Rhodes, or they saw someone doing it very successfully. And they think that they're going to be able to emulate that success in a very short amount of time. So they do what took my family 10 years. They might try to do it all in 1 year. And I would caution families that you can run the risk of really burning out your family in the process of trying to achieve your dream. So I encourage families to take it slow and learn at the beginning years. And then once you get a handle, and it might take you a little while, once you get a handle on what you're doing, then write the business plan, or then develop if this makes sense. But don't quit your day job all at once. Try to find some kind of happy medium where you might have to take reduced pay. You might take a job that just allows more flexibility, but it's not quite as much income. Or you might have to downsize your expenses to make it work. We know a lot of families that have relocated, or they've sold their homes and moved into smaller homes to get that was the painter that I interviewed for the book, in order to get his small business started. So there are creative ways. You're not locked into your life right now. You can make some drastic moves, but I would say initially go slow and learn what you're doing if you don't have a background in this, and then develop. The wisdom will come. And frankly, I believe if you're trying to bring your family together in the process, which is what the focus of the book is on, is family economies, I believe that there is a blessing from God in that process. And I believe that He will lead you. He wants you to be together. He wants you to live on the land. He wants you to enjoy the blessings that He has for you. And so, it may not be quite the same tax bracket, but what's the difference? If you're enjoying your life and you're raising godly offspring, and you're passing on a generational inheritance, I'd much rather have the latter. And that's basically kind of what we've learned to do.
Can you say more about the patience angle? Because there's a couple different competing ideas. Like, yes, okay, we're all high achieving, motivated, ambitious men, and we channel that ambition into making it work on the farm or the homestead. Fantastic, praise God. But there's also a component of like, wow, our backs are really against the wall societally as well. There's a feeling like how to get it running as quickly as possible, to be balanced with what you said, which is like, no, this is going to take time one way or another. Like, maybe you can talk a little bit about your own process of gaining wisdom, or the patience that you learn through it, because 10 years is a significant investment of time. I mean, it was, a couple of years ago, it was a different place, for sure, like aspirational even then. But talk a little bit about how maybe you've had to learn this lesson.
Oh, absolutely. I think there were, if you remember the 2008 recession, we moved out here, I think in 2012. So we were still kind of on the heels of that recession. And there was an uneasy feeling about where things were at. And we had, remember all the TARP, remember how much uproar there was over the $800 billion of TARP money that was spent, and that the whole Tea Party formed around that. I mean, it was a massive protest, and we'll throw $800 billion out the window like it's nothing in these days. This day, I mean, every year there's another $1 trillion. So anyway, back then, yes, I had very much that concern. I mean, but the thing I learned is that you couldn't do it all. I mean, you literally can't do everything. And if you think you're going to buy some seeds and store them in a freezer and then just grow food when you get hungry someday, you got another thing coming. Because I mean, we are still grappling with how to grow enough food to feed our family just from our own garden. And we've been at this for a long time. Now, that said, I do think that I think there's grace for that. And I think that maybe if the Lord puts an urgency on your heart, it's probably because He wants you to get started somewhere, somehow. And and it may not even happen right away. I think about that all the time. Like, well, what's the timing of all of this? Well, we just don't know. We're not in control of that. And you kind of know what you're capable of. You know what your family's capable of. If you're burning your family out, then you're pushing it too hard. And as a father, those are the kind of cues that you need to be able to read. I would say that, coming back to that question that we were talking about before, one of the things that was also different about pre-industrial times is families worked many different trades. They were not specialized in just one vocation, very rarely. I mean, like George Washington was a surveyor, but he was also a gardener, and he was also an orchardist. And